This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 151, Unlocking the Power of Microcontent, an interview with short format video expert Frank Danna. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is December 3rd, 2015. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Also, to get your daily dose of Content Marketing Mojo, I invite you to follow us on Twitter at Resonance CONT. That's Resonance Content with the ENT lopped off. And just to let you know, December is shaping up to be interview month here on the podcast. We've got a great interview with Frank Danna today about microcontent. I just wrapped up an interview with the CEO of Nebris, and also my friend Shelley Roth is publishing a new book, and she will be joining us to talk about it. So I didn't really plan it that way. I just keep running across terrific people to interview and couldn't wait to share them with you. So stay tuned. Okay, last week was a big milestone. It was episode number 150, and I shared some of the things that I've learned as a content marketer since my first turn behind the microphone 150 episodes ago. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or on Stitcher or via the RSS feed. This week, we're talking about microcontent, specifically microcontent on Instagram, Vine, and Snapchat with short format video expert Frank Danna. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Kicking off our news feed, we've got some news out of Snapchat, which coincidentally is one of the topics we'll be talking about with Frank in today's interview. Snapchat has introduced a feature called Story Explorer. And the way it works is if you see a snap of a particular moment, you can swipe up on your mobile device and see other snaps of that same moment. It seems to be similar to Twitter's Moments that they released a few months ago. But it's great for events. You know, if you've got an event, if you are if you've got a great speaker and people are watching it, then they can get different perspectives on that, whatever it happens to be going on. So Story Explorer launched last week in the New York and Los Angeles live stories, and will soon be rolling out across many more stories very, very soon. So something to look out for on Snapchat. Also, another app we'll be talking about is Instagram. Frank Danna will be sharing some insights on Instagram today, and Instagram is currently testing multiple account support on its Android app. And this is going to be especially handy for business owners. Because a lot of folks have business accounts and personal accounts on Instagram. And of course, they use the business for businessy stuff and the personal for family stuff. And what Instagram is doing when they introduce this multiple account support, it's going to make it easier to switch back and forth without having to log out and log back in again. And I have not used, I have one Instagram account that I use mainly for business, but no, I share a lot of dog stuff on there. I can't lie, but I do have two different Twitter accounts, and it's really handy to be able to switch back and forth. So it's good to see Instagram going down that same road. No word on when this feature will be widely available on Android or on iOS, but I will keep you posted. Okay, something different in the content hit of the week. I have an online class to tell you about. This is a complimentary masterclass being offered by our friends at HubSpot, and it's called How to Generate More Leads with Content Marketing. And this really caught my eye because it's something that I'm working on for my own business, for my own agency in 2016, is focusing on lead generation, and saw this course and signed up for it immediately. So I have not yet begun the course, but our friends at HubSpot always do a terrific job in sharing salient information. So looking forward to checking that out. And I recommend that you do so as well. So I will provide the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's news feed. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Unlocking the Power of Microcontent, an interview with short format video expert Frank Danna. The way this interview came about is that I saw Frank Danna speak at an AMA Houston event, American Marketing Association, and his presentation was just so intriguing and so captivating, and I just so enjoyed his passion for what he does that as soon as the event was over, I went right up to him, gave him my card, and said, I must have you as a guest on my podcast, and you will shortly find out why. Frank Danna is the Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Softway. He's also the co-founder of Parabox Creative, a micro-content agency that was acquired by Softway in 2014. His videos have been viewed over 50 million times across social platforms. He's helped many of the world's top brands navigate the social media landscape, providing massive value to brands and consumers alike. Frank has created and directed short films for over 70, that's 70 world-class brands, including ESPN, BMW, HBO, Target, Samsung, Chevrolet, Nintendo, Home Depot, and many others. He provides a unique and indispensable understanding of emerging social platforms, content strategy, influencer marketing, and content creation for social advertising and promotion. And today he is kind enough to join us for a chat about how to unlock the power of microcontent on Instagram, Vine, and Snapchat. Without further ado, here's my interview with Frank Danna. Hey, Frank, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Rachel. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you. So now that I've given your official bio, can you give us a little bit more personal introduction to who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I work for a pretty neat agency here in Houston, and we actually had our company was acquired by Softway in mid 2014, and it's all about creating really cool content. So what I love to do is tell stories, and that's really the goal of making things. Is just to tell a story and to tell it in a way that people actually care about, because a brand is a group of people, and the people that are consuming that content are also people. And so storytelling is sort of the bridge that connects those two groups. So I absolutely adore making stories that matter to people, making stories that are relevant or engaging or optimistic or captivating in some way. And so that's why I get up in the morning. And that's really where I started. I started from a position of passion. I wanted to make things because I felt like I had the tools to do so. And when I started actually creating, things got better. And I have the support from my wife and my family and from the people around me that at first were a little like leery about it. They're like, okay, you're staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning making vines. Is this going to pay the bills? Yeah. And I was like, well, maybe. I wasn't thinking about the monetary gain at all. I was thinking about creating really engaging content and just making and having fun and building community. And so that's really what drives me. The opportunity to tell really cool stories is something that I absolutely enjoy doing.
Wonderful. And I love how you bring out the human side of storytelling, because sometimes when I talk to brands about storytelling, they say, oh, we're going to go tell stories about how amazing we are. It's like, no, that's called advertising.
That's advertising. I mean, so honestly, the brand should take the position of mentor, and they should be the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker. And yes, I did bring up Star Wars like less than 2 minutes in. But they should be the ruby slippers in the Wizard of Oz. They should be the thing that helps push the story forward, but it shouldn't be about them. The brand should not be trying to focus energy on what they are, who they are, how they can position themselves, but rather what they can do for people and how they can do that. When you break it down to that sort of kernel, what you end up with is an opportunity to tell a really compelling story that is human focused.
And by the way, Frank, I use the Star Wars comparison too, only I use Yoda.
Perfect. Either way, it totally works because we don't know who Luke is in this new movie. I mean, we can just sort of segue into talking about who he may be in The Force Awakens, but ultimately, I think Star Wars is a really interesting. There's so many things we can say about it. And it's literally like every person that I talk to. I was at a fundraiser over the weekend for this nonprofit that we're part of, and the MC was like talking about the Force, and I'm going, how is this permeated every segment of our culture, like to the point of where it doesn't matter how old or young you are, you know what Star Wars is. It's just here. So anyway, now we've just started talking about Star Wars.
We'll just talk about Star Wars for the next hour. I can dig that.
So last night, J.J. Abrams was on. I'm just kidding.
Okay, great. So Frank, the reason I contacted you, the reason I couldn't wait to have you on this podcast was because of this wonderful presentation that you gave for the local AMA chapter about microcontent.
Yeah.
So for the purpose of kicking off our conversation today, can you give us an introduction of what is microcontent?
Well, the way that the world at large defines short form content is anything that's like under 5 minutes. And so when I say short form content, people are thinking short stories or short films. When I say micro content, I'm talking about content that is no longer than 15 to 30 seconds. So traditional ads are within the 15 to 30 second spot. But when you get down into the 6 second, then we're really micro when we're talking about Vine. 10 seconds per Snapchat video or Snapchat image, whatever, up to 10 seconds. So anything that's really lower or under that 15-second mark is micro content. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just video. It could also be still images or GIFs or anything else that can convey a message in a short period of time. And when I say short, I mean like a few seconds short.
Which is appropriate because, as you pointed out, our attention span is now, 8 seconds?
It's dwindling, yeah, and that's not a bad thing. And really, the good thing about that is that we are more conscious of time. So we as humanity are more conscious of the fact that time is precious and that we need to care about things deeply that we truly care about. And if there's something that doesn't register with us, if it's not providing us value, then we're going to skip it. So it's really us as society becoming smarter in the way that we consume content. Because back in the day, we wouldn't think about time in such a prevalent way. Right. So when people are scrolling through Twitter, for instance, if you don't have something that's like highly captivating, that's interesting, that's disruptive in nature, you're not going to capture their attention. And that's important. That I feel like our society has actually gotten smarter. It's not sort of a push on the notion that, okay, well, people they don't want to focus. It's that they want to focus on what they care about, and they have an opportunity to do so. So us as content creators and marketers and advertisers or whatever we are, storytellers, we have to be conscious of that. We have to know that people are going to care deeply about things they care deeply about, and things they don't, they're going to ignore.
Frank, speaking of stories, I love the story you shared about how you came to do what you do. Something about Barbie doll heads being strewn all over your house that your wife found very interesting. Can you tell us that story?
That was part of it. I mean, I did glue them to the ceiling. It was really like a weird week. I'm just kidding. So I downloaded Vine the day that it launched, and I was an OG Viner, day zero. And I did it because Jack Dorsey was like, download this. And I was like, thank you for Square and Twitter, Jack. I will do so. So I downloaded it, and I started playing around with it. And I immediately fell in love with the opportunity to create content in a Square. And it was a sandbox. It literally, like, I couldn't have started on YouTube because YouTube had an unlimited time span, or up to 10 minutes. And that, in my mind, is massive. Like, I don't even know what to do with 10 minutes. So I started making stuff, and I would stay up every single night and just make a video. And I did not have any, like formal training in stop motion animation or anything else. I just started playing with it on the platform. And as I did that, I began to get recognized. So I won an award with Tribeca Film Festival early on, and I started getting articles written about me in Mashable and CNN, and all these different places are starting to talk about these up and coming content creators that are starting to work with brands. And the first time I realized that I could actually monetize this, I went to Fiverr, which was kind of a mistake because I would end up spending 6 to 10 hours producing something and getting paid like less than $5 after they take 50 cents. So my wife is sitting there and she's literally like, you realize you were losing so much money, because I wasn't considering my time. I was like, my time is my time. I'm chalking this up to experience. So I go from Fiverr making a few dollars per piece to getting contacted by Jennifer Lopez's Digital Street team and Mattel at the same time. This is a few months later. This is right before we create, my co-founder and I create Parabox as a company, because we realized, okay, we need to go from freelancer to actual company, and this was sort of the catalyst. So they contacted me and said, hey, listen, we like what you do. Would you be willing to be the first person ever to work with Barbie doll outside of our studios to launch Jennifer Lopez's Barbie on Instagram? And after I picked my face up off the floor, I realized that this is something that's going to change the world. So I said, I absolutely was like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't think that's a good move for me. Let's just part ways. Let's not even be amicable about it. Let's just be enemies. So, of course, I said yes, and we jumped into the production side of things. And what they had to do, because they actually have a full-time person on staff. This is fascinating at Mattel. Maybe it's fascinating to me because I have a daughter. But that person is in charge of hair, making sure that the hair doesn't get too fluffy as things are being moved. And they said, well, you're the first person ever that's not going to have that person on site, so we're going to have to send you a bunch of extra J-Lo heads for these Barbie dolls. And I was like, how many is a bunch of extra J-Lo heads? And they were like, I don't know, 3 dozen. So I'm up at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's got to be like 2 a.m. And I've got all these J-Lo heads like stacked around the room in different levels of fatigue. Like the hair goes from like straight to full on afro after I mess with it enough times. So I'm popping heads off, throwing them across the room because I have no time to move. And then I just grab a new head, pop it on, and my wife comes out and she's like, what is go? It looked like a weird like Barbie seance. And it was so odd. But in that moment, the all-nighter that I ended up pulling, I started realizing how much I really loved it, and how I love the whole like tactile nature of this stuff. And that's really what started it off. And since then, I've worked with about 150 of the world's biggest brands, creating content across all platforms, not just on Vine, but other places, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat has been a big part of it, Facebook. So we've really kind of diversified and have jumped in, head first.
Wow.
Fantastic.
So I want to go through the 3 platforms that you talked about, and those are Instagram, Vine, and Snapchat. And I want to start with Instagram because
Sure.
it's probably the most well-known of the 3.
Definitely.
Now, when a lot of us think of Instagram, we think about teenagers snapping selfies, and we say, okay, how could this possibly help my marketing? So how does Instagram fit into a savvy marketing campaign?
Well, I think it's interesting. We should just skip it because it's basically just teens snapping selfies. Like, that's all it is. Like, I'm just kidding. It is a very powerful tool to tell really compelling stories. So, number one, what brands need to know is that it needs to be used for the type of person on the platform. So, you can't use Instagram to showcase marketing pieces that have no connection to that audience, because it's literally like walking into a room and not knowing your audience and just screaming at people to try to get them to listen to you. No one's going to pay attention. So you have to create a way of communicating with them for who the people are. So the first question to ask yourself as a brand is, who am I trying to communicate with? If I sell shoes, or if I am a window washing service, how am I going to communicate what I am capable of doing to an audience that is highly visual and isn't really interested in copy or text being on images? So smart brands are thinking outside of the box, and they're going with high quality, high polish images that actually resonate with people. The actual Instagram platform now opened up ads, and that's been a big deal, and now everybody's using it. But one thing I've noticed as a trend is that brands are willing to embrace higher polish, high quality visuals to really sell their story and their capabilities, and not try to form fit something else from some other place. And so from my perspective, what I feel like is a brand needs to really understand what is the visual messaging they're trying to convey, and how can they do that in a way that feels organic to the platform. That's really the best way of going about it. For us at Softway, we have an incredible team of like 2D and 3D animators and typographers, and myself on the physical assets and everything else. And so what we created as an agency, we just recently rebranded, so this is kind of fun. We do not have an agency Instagram for showcasing company culture. Like, we just ignored the notion of using Instagram for this space because it doesn't really work. Instead, what we did was we created an Instagram channel called Softway Collective, so at Softway Collective. And all it is passion projects from our animators and our like content creators in our company showing stuff off that they love to make. Like we just posted one for The Good Dinosaur yesterday, and we got stuff from Fantasia and Mickey Mouse and all of these different things that are highly visual, that are digital art and illustrations and animation that showcase our core competencies without selling our core competencies. And that's what I think brands need to start thinking about is it's not just about, oh yeah, we sell window washing as a service, but how can you tell a dynamic story that doesn't feel like you're selling to people? It feels like you're teaching or educating or enlightening or entertaining them. And that's really the goal.
Yeah. Frank, that reminds me of a story I heard at a conference one time about a barber shop in New York. And he uses Instagram not to show pictures of the haircuts, but to tell the stories behind the haircuts. This guy was going to his first interview out of college and those stories were just so compelling and he just attracted a huge following.
And that's what's so awesome about these types of platforms is, and specifically Instagram is really the storytelling notion. So you've got this incredible image, this visual asset, and then you've got a lot of space to write copy out. And so when we're talking to brands, it's really about getting stories, getting other people, and again, it's the brand stepping out of the way and saying, how can I communicate? How can I share? How can I add value to someone's life in this space? But also keeping in mind the specific viewership, like the consumer mix on the platform. If people don't care about it, they're not going to consume it, and you're just going to be skipped over.
Yeah. Now Instagram, Frank, if I'm not mistaken, Instagram, you can upload photos or images, but you can also upload videos. So how do you see things? How does that? How is the experience different? How are the results different on those two different media on this one platform?
Well, I think that photos are still winning the day in terms of content that's being generated on there. And there's some stats that are showing that people are engaging far more with photos than they are with videos, but it's starting to become more prevalent. So people are starting to recognize that videos aren't necessarily going away. And so I really do feel like Instagram is still a platform for photos. And and videos can help sell the message, but if you're going to use a video with audio, it's an extra ask to actually turn on the little icon to turn on the audio, and then you have to watch it again once it loops. So it doesn't feel like it's been intrinsically developed around video because it hasn't or wasn't. I still think photos are winning. If you're going to use videos, though, I would try to make sure that it still feels very dynamic and very cinematic, and that if there's any copy at all, it's driven directly into the description section. But I think photos still win the day for sure.
So, Frank, if you had to pick one thing that the Instagram, the real rock stars in Instagram, one thing that they know that they are incorporating into their strategy, then the rest of us may not know about, what would you say is they're doing that's most important?
So it's interesting. I actually asked quite a few people on the Instagram platform that are pretty big. And that are kind of moving and kind of killing the game, essentially. So a few of their suggestions about like what keeps them motivated and essentially like what are they doing that other people aren't. It's number one, it's defining your own style and being known for that style. So don't worry about what other people are doing. You create your own style and you do it. And so if you're defining your own style and you're pursuing what you love, then people are going to take notice. But the number one thing that everyone talks about and that I feel like is paramount is being consistent, is persevering.
Yeah.
Most of the time people will jump in, they'll start with something on the platform, and then they'll just leave. They won't be consistent with it. The people that are the rock stars that are legitimately rocking Instagram is they have consistent posting cycles. They are posting whether or not it's the best thing they can. They're posting on a very consistent basis. Yeah. They're connecting and engaging, but they're persevering and they're pushing forward. Those are the people that are going to win. At the end of the day, they're the people that are in front of the audience the most. If they have content coming up once or twice a day, people will see them more than anyone else, and they'll want to continue to engage. Right. And so when you're making things you're proud of, you're defining your own style, and you're consistent, you're going to kill it. So, and there's a book that was written about being first, best, and different. And And sometimes you can't be first. Like I was first on Vine, or one of the very, very first.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that I intrinsically garnered a lot of followers up front.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody jumps into Instagram today, for instance, it feels daunting. They're like, well, I mean, there's already 400 million plus people on here. How on earth am I going to even make a dent?
Mm-hmm.
That's what separates, the rock stars from everyone else, is the people that are focused on telling a certain story. They don't care. They're just going to do it. And so while all these other people are worried about not even wanting to get started because it feels so huge,
Mm-hmm.
these other people are taking advantage of those individuals' unwillingness to pursue it, and they're stepping in and reaping all the rewards for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Frank. That's a conversation I have with clients all the time. I say, okay, a year from now, you can either be just starting to create content, or you could wish you had started a year ago. Where do you want to be?
Exactly.
Okay, great. A great introduction to Instagram. So now I want to move on to your first love in micro content, and that is Vine. So it seems like Vine made a big splash when it first came on the scene. It was bought by Twitter, and then people just kind of settled in, and some people stuck with it, and some didn't. So what has been your experience with Vine post Barbie doll?
Post Barbies, which was ironically for Instagram, which is kind of funny because I was like, yeah, I'm on Vine. They're like, cool, yeah, can you do it for Instagram? And I was like, what? And I mean, this is like 2 months after a video comes out, or 3 months after a video comes out on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you. If we're being completely honest, Vine has definitely not been a place where communities are essentially being formed around brands. And it's really a place to consume content. And what I do notice, though, is that a lot of trends, like internet trends, like, on fleek, the term on fleek came from Vine. The what are those also came from Vine. And it's very childish. Or the bruh, all that stuff. It originates, a lot of the memes and the kind of the movements originate on the Vine platform, which is interesting that it's still kind of churning that type of stuff out. But also, interesting enough, like Vine is aware of this. Like I was up in New York a few weeks ago, and I was meeting with the Vine team and talking to them about my experience on it. And I was like, you guys changed my life. Thank you so much. And I'm like weeping as I'm saying this. We were talking about that very same thing. And they want to build this platform out to be more creator-centric and less consumer-centric. And I think they're moving in the right direction in terms of polishing the platform and really making it what it was intended to be. But what brands are doing is they're still using Vine. I mean, 80 to 90% of my work that's coming in to produce this type of advertising is still coming in through Vine. However, it's being consumed elsewhere. So Twitter is still very, very interested in moving Vine forward and continuing to produce content. Or Twitter is very interested in investing in Viners and investing in people that are producing content on the platform. Brands are also interested in it, but they're not necessarily as engaged on the platform itself. So for instance, a lot of these brands are going to say, hey, make us Vines, but we really want to use them on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And Twitter video is something that recently came up, but for whatever reason, Vines are still very prevalent and they're a little bit more trusted for whatever reason on the platform. Mm-hmm. So the option for Twitter to allow direct uploads hasn't really killed Vine's presence through it. It's just another way to get your content out there. And Vine is still pretty prevalent, but I totally agree. It's truly being kind of utilized and engaged with outside of the platform at large, outside of the actual app itself.
Right, and that actually was going to be my next question about how Twitter now allows direct uploads of videos and the effect that it has on Vine. Now, Twitter also has a limit on videos, do they not?
They do, yeah. So I believe it's somewhere between 15 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so they are limiting that as well. And then they also have pre-roll ads that are going to be playing that are 6 seconds. And so, well, if a pre-roll ad on Twitter is going to be 6 seconds long, then that means that they're still deeply invested in storytellers being able to communicate content in 6 seconds. So they're putting a lot of emphasis on that time frame as well. It may not necessarily happen from Vine itself. There may not be pre-roll ads or pre-roll videos that are from the Vine platform, but they're going to be built in the same time frame. So they're using that almost as like a foundation to build their overarching theme around the length of time an ad should be on the platform. which I think is pretty interesting, and I think it'll keep us moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Frank, when you work with clients and you start working with them on Vine, and they ask the question, what can I possibly convey in 6 seconds? How do you respond to that?
Well, every story has a beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And if you actually count to 6, it's a pretty long period of time. So 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000. In that time frame, and it's actually 6.5 seconds, but in that time frame, it is possible to convey a story.
Mm-hmm.
And the looping nature of Vine allows you to tell a story that starts and ends in a very organic way. And so it actually like pushes the individual to continue to watch the content. But Robert De Niro, actually, when he was hosting the first Tribeca Film Festival with Vine, he was asked about it as well. And what I usually tell people is, if Robert De Niro said that it's possible, it's possible.
Kind of the Chuck Norris of entertainment, right?
He's the Chuck Norris of it. Honestly, if Goodfellas says it's possible,
that's right.
Let's just be real. But interestingly enough, like he defended it because people were like, "How can you tell a story in 6 seconds?" And he did that same thing. He counted, like sitting there, and you're like, "Why are you wasting 6 seconds of my life?" And then you realize, oh, there is time to say something, to start a story, to tell the middle portion of it, the meat of the sandwich, and then to finish it off, and then to loop it back again. And so the challenge for us, or what I call like bonus points, are if you're capable of looping a story and having it perfectly match and sync with the beginning, then you've told an even better story because you're using the platform to its full potential.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And speaking of which, Frank, one of my favorite stories on Vine is I think it's Lowe's that did the Fix and Six.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and they actually did they steal one of Pixar's animators, or they got someone fairly high up?
They actually have an animator. I believe it was either Pixar or the other company, the other film studio that made like Paranorman and Caroline. Mm-hmm. It's one of those individuals that they're essentially like not only a full-time animator, they're like a rock star animator that's full time with them in stop motion. I have a good friend of mine who from Vine who was recently hired to produce Robot Chicken as well, and to animate on Robot Chicken. So there are people that are like building not only full-time careers, but like, legitimate opportunities through these platforms, and are really just reaping the rewards of staying consistent and making really cool stuff.
I love me some Robot Chicken.
I know, it's great, right? So, and his animating style was perfect for it. So we were counting down the days to when he would actually get an opportunity to do it. And he did it. He jumped in and started doing great work. So shout out to Johnny, man. It's amazing what we can do. And that's why I love these types of platforms. And it's really, I'm sort of platform agnostic. What platform can tell, first of all, how many times can I say platform in a sentence? But secondly, what type of story do you need to convey? There is a space out there. There's a community out there to tell that story. And what's great about it is when you start really figuring it out, there are communities that are built in these different areas where this tight-knit group of people that truly care and love for each other and care about each other are celebrating these amazing wins and are creating this really engaging content and are able to stay like consistent and stay up to date and win awards together and do all of these cool things. And so that's what I love about these social communities is it's not just about building content, it's also about building relationships. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as you kind of get into it and become an influencer on these platforms, you start building true relationships with these people, and you also get really, really good insight into where the platform is going and how it's shifting and changing and where people should be focusing their energy.
Yep. So, Frank, I want to move on to the third of the platform. There it is again.
Take a shot. Everybody take a shot.
That's right. So you started with Instagram, and then you moved on to Vine, and then I could feel a physical shift in the energy of the room when you started talking about Snapchat.
Yeah, they got all uncomfortable.
It was, very uncomfortable. They were like, hey, I'm hip. I'm with it. I know Instagram. I know, whoa, Snapchat. Whoa there, buddy. That's just crazy.
I'm not that with it. Like, dude, calm it down, bro. Snapchat is in the news every other minute, but it's not in the news for nudes anymore. Mm-hmm. It is becoming a dynamic, incredibly powerful place to tell really engaging stories. Mm-hmm. And what's great about Snapchat is that besides the random filters that you can swipe through and play with, like the overlays that they put on your faces now, which is creepy, there's no way to edit it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a real perspective into someone's life, day to day, the closest thing you can get to real time on Periscope or Meerkat, which is why I think it has the potential to kind of level the playing field. When we talk a lot about, maybe not most people, but when I talk a lot about how, there are these sort of like, there are these masks that people wear on these platforms that they act one way, or they add 4 or 5 filters to an image to try to make themselves look a certain way or whatever else. Snapchat breaks all those barriers down, and it honestly says, let me show you who I am. And obviously you can create really captivating stories on the platform through it, but it's the most real and raw and organic way of presenting yourself in these different spaces, and that's why I think it has potential to do some really, really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, if I understand correctly, Snapchat has somewhat of a different following system from Instagram and Vine. So can you sort that out for us a little bit?
All right. No, I actually cannot make it any more clear than the murkiness. But what I can tell you is that Snapchat is very interesting. There is no way to know what your follower count is at all. The only thing you've got, and you can ask Snapchat and they'll just laugh at you if you're like, can you tell me how many followers I have? They're like, no, go about your business. It's interesting because the only thing you can see on there is opens and screenshots. So if someone opens and views your content, you can see who it is. You can actually see the username of that. So you can kind of gather about how many followers you have or about how many opens based on that that open rate. But it is extremely difficult to know because they purposefully limit it. They also purposely limit the discover section. So there's really no way to find and follow really cool new people on there unless you type in their username or find their QR code or their QR code that's custom built for Snapchat on the internet. So they've purposely made it difficult to know your followers or to know how many people you're following or are following you, and to find other people on the platform.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I have no answer for why that is.
Okay. We'll have to contact Snapchat and have them laugh at us.
Yeah, they're actually pretty cool. So we did get a chance to talk to them while we were up in New York. One of our friends that used to work for Mashable, and now their name's Dasha, and she was talking about how it's an ongoing conversation is the kind of the PR answer. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that, but essentially they're considering how to sort of grow the opportunity to find new people and how they're going to utilize analytics on the platform, but they haven't yet figured it out. They want to do it right, so they just haven't released it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how are marketers using Snapchat? How are they leveraging this particular platform?
So majority of the time, a marketer or an advertiser or brand specifically are working heavily with influencers because, again, the only way to really garner traction is by having validation from someone else. And so the opportunity is to get an influencer to talk about your brand and to drive them over to the brand's profile for people to watch and connect with that content. So what most people are doing right now is finding influencers on the platform that can speak to their brand in a very organic and real way, and a very similar way that influencers are being used elsewhere. But here, it's kind of difficult to figure it out. And so as a brand, you can't just arrive and be like, I'm here, everyone, and then there's no echo chamber. Like, it's just you in a small confined room. Like, there's no way to get yourself out there without partnering very strategically with individuals that can help share your vision to other people. And so that's where the trend is right now. Working with an influencer or a company or an agency that can get the word out.
Interesting. So Frank, we've talked about these 3 different platforms, and I remember when you gave your presentation, you shared some very interesting demographics about who is using these platforms and how they're using them. Can you give us a little bit of that perspective?
So Vine is interesting. It's got a younger demo. So anywhere from 15 years old to 25 years old, those are the types of people using the platform. It's primarily younger millennial to the generation even before millennials. Interestingly enough, they've got about 100 million monthly users, 1.5 billion loops daily. So a loop on the Vine platform is every time a video plays, it counts it as one loop. So we're getting a lot of loops on a daily basis. And there are about 12 million plus Vines uploaded to Twitter daily. Another interesting stat is 31.8% of 14 to 17-year-olds are actually actively using the platform. So it's a pretty significant amount of people. On Snapchat, we've got about 100 million daily active users, which is huge. The crazy thing is 65% of those are engaged and contributing daily.
Wow.
So out of the 100 plus daily active, 65% are highly engaged and contributing. They're not just consuming, they're creating. 4 billion video views daily. And the demos here are interesting. It's 18 to 24. So it's pushing up a little bit from that younger teen demo and then pushing down just a smidge from that 25-year-old space. And that's about 45% of the users are in that demo. On Instagram, we've got about 400 million monthly active users as it stands now. 71% of businesses are said to be on the platform by 2017.
Wow.
So again, this has a lot to do with being first, best, and different. You can, and like what you say to your clients, which I think is a fantastic way of presenting it, you can either have done a full year's worth of marketing and creating this great content, or you can be behind by a year or 2 years. And so to any businesses out there that are like, maybe I should, maybe I won't, maybe I will, think about it this way. Once the market gets more flooded, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So if you jump on now and you start building consistency and you start building relationships and building community, which leads to fans and to people that are really going to be pushing who you are out to the rest of the world, then you have an opportunity to step in right now. Even though it feels like you're late to the party, you're not late. You're never late to the party. As long as you make something that's really cool, you're going to make it. Interestingly enough, 77.6 million users are in the U.S. 77.6 million users are in the U.S. alone. So those are some stats about these platforms that are really incredible. And Instagram also delivers like 58 times more engagement per follower than Facebook and 120 times more engagement than Twitter.
Wow.
It's a huge engagement platform. I mean, what's funny to me too is that teenagers are like, yeah, I'm never on Facebook. I'm on Instagram all the time. And I'm like, Instagram is Facebook? And they're like, what?
No, shut up.
What? And then I'm just slowly dwindling that 400 million a month users down. Like, they're going back to MySpace. That's not actually going to ever happen. Poor Justin Timberlake tried so hard to make it work, and he just didn't.
Yeah,
he just didn't. We love you, Justin. JT, shout out to JT if he's listening.
That's right. I'm sure he is.
Yeah, he definitely.
Yeah, we're BFFs. He doesn't know it yet.
Oh my gosh. That would be really cool, actually. If he pops in, he's like, hey guys, what's going on? I'm working on your album.
All right. We're going to retweet from him.
Done.
Yep. Well, Frank, you shared a ton of great information about the current environment and giving us a lot to think about. So I'm going to ask a very dangerous question, and that is, what's next?
Oh my gosh. You just threw a grenade at me. So nothing is next. Actually, I think we're in a pretty good spot right now. And there are a few emerging platforms. Snapchat is pretty much the most emerging-ish. That's not a word. But what I would probably want to do is a lot of these brands, like in the room, literally, like at the AMA, people were literally like, all right, he brought up Snapchat, like as an actual thing. So I don't know if we're ready yet to push past Snapchat. But what I do feel like is that we should start innovating with what we have at our disposal. So we've got these 3 or 4 really powerful, really interesting platforms. Facebook is still a really big deal. Weirdly enough, I mean, a few months ago, I was not on Facebook ever. And now I'm on Facebook all the time for some weird reason. And all I do is watch BuzzFeed videos. But it's really all about how to connect with your audience. And if your audience is on a platform like Instagram where they're highly visual, then connect with them there. If your audience is on Twitter, then make stuff that connects with the type of people that use those platforms. But keep this in mind. People use more than one platform.
Yes.
So you as a brand have to understand that it's not just, well, I almost started rhyming. I'm going to actually rhyme it now. You as a brand, no, I'm not going to. What you got to do is realize that even though they're the same person on Twitter and maybe Instagram and Facebook, they're going to be consuming content differently on each of those platforms. So it's really about learning best practices for each of those spaces instead of trying to push past and find the fringe platforms that haven't really found maturity or haven't really found like the viewership necessary to really drive relationship or engagement over to them. It works for some of the larger scale multinational billion-dollar plus companies because they can afford to invest in it without seeing a lot of ROI. But if you're a brand that really needs to focus in and start making those relationships and essentially making opportunities for additional revenue, what you've got to do is essentially like what the Little Mermaid says. You got to be where the people are. Mm-hmm. And so Snapchat, you can't ignore Snapchat anymore. Like people are like, yes, I can. And I'm like, okay, cool, you do that. And that's not going to work out well for you. So consider Snapchat, consider Vine, even as a content platform that can connect to Twitter. Consider Twitter itself and Facebook and how to engage on those platforms. As people are moving into more video, then you need to have video and marketing video content in your budget. You need to have a budget for boosting your Facebook posts, because we may get to Facebook zero, which essentially means that without having anything boosted, you're not going to be able to reach any of your organic audience, which is fine because it's essentially paying for advertising anyway that everybody else does it. But so I may have just alienated like everyone by saying that. But the whole thing is you need to consider the opportunity of using these platforms where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of traction, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do, and ultimately you can tell really, really cool stories on it. So let's catch our breath for a while. Let's learn how to just really, really leverage these to the best of your ability as a brand or as a marketer or as an agency and move forward from there. And that's what I think to do is take those steps, but you got to catch up. If you're not there, you got to step in.
Yep, great advice. Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. If our listeners would like to learn more from you and follow you, how would they go about that?
So I'm on Twitter as @Erskine. That's my middle name, Erskine. So I post lots of random stuff there, but mostly it has to do with the space that I'm involved in now. And I usually post like my favorite Vines of all time. They're not usually mine. They're other people's that are just incredibly funny. On LinkedIn, you can find me at Frank Danna. That's FrankDanna. I don't know why I spelled the word Frank because most people know how to spell that.
Well, it's spelled with a Q.
It's Frank. Frank. And then on Vine as well, Frank Danna. And so you can basically find me all over the internet. Twitter is the only weird thing where it's my middle name instead of my first name, but you should still find me there as well. But I would love to connect. If you have any more questions or comments or emotional outbursts, or you'd love to talk about The Force Awakens or why I'm on Snapchat, please just reach out. Let's talk. If you're in Houston or in this area, we can grab lunch, and it'd be great to connect. So I'd love to say hey.
All right, wonderful. Well, Frank, thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to having you back.
This has been awesome, Rachel. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
All right, you too. Many thanks again to Frank for joining us today and sharing his expertise on microcontent. Again, you can follow Frank on Twitter at @Erskine, Erskine. And it's funny, I was chatting with him about that the Twitter handle. It's actually his middle name, but there's also a college in South Carolina called Erskine College, and he says he also often gets tweets from students asking about their grades or, whether they can drop a course, etc. And he just tells them no. So, if you have any questions or want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will give you that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Yes, believe it or not, we are in the last month of 2015. I cannot believe how fast this year has gone by, but lo and behold, here we are in December. The good news is we still have time to get our 2016 strategies wrapped up and ready to roll on January 2nd. And the first step is pretty simple. It's just take a look at your 2015 strategy. Now, you may have to dig it out of the bottom of a file drawer and blow the dust off or search through your hard drive, but wherever it happens to be, pull it out and just look at it with an eye to everything that's happened over the last 12 months. You're going to ask yourself questions like, what has changed in the content world? What trends have started to emerge? And then look a little bit closer and think, well, what has changed in your industry? And finally, what has changed in your company that's going to inform what you do in 2016? And once you've answered those questions, you will be well on your way to making the adjustments you need for a strong start in 2016. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I want to say thank you again to our interview guest, Frank Danna. And once again, you can follow him on Twitter at Erskine, and that's at Erskine, not to be confused with the college in South Carolina. Okay, if you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, if you want to learn more about content marketing or if you want to contact us, I invite you to check out our website, resonancecontent.com, where you'll find our blog as well as links to our social media pages and a page where you can contact us. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Benjamin Franklin. He once said, quote, "It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only one bad one to lose it." Unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.